couple of days, an array of media figures and political elites have demonstrated why they're often called talking heads rather than thinking heads, as they repeatedly argue that the president's attacks on those millionaire athlete protesters were both scary and bigoted. Watch.
He came proverbially as close as you could possibly come to shouting in a rally the N-word.
You tell me which of those children's mothers are a son of a bee. That is racism.
When the president refers to Colin Kaepernick in Alabama as a son of the B word, it is racial code for the N-word.
You don't have to agree with them, but that's not really the point here. No American gets to tell another American how to express their love for this country.
Did you hear that? No American gets to tell another American how to express their love for this country. If only that were true. But it's not true, not even close. It's disingenuous nonsense. The same people lecturing you about free speech would be the very first to call for your job if you dared stray from the approved script of acceptable public discourse they so assiduously maintain. They're the word police. They demand control over what you say and think. They could care less about free expression or individual conscience, much less about the First Amendment. Stop insulting us with this garbage. It is lying. And if you don't believe it, consider what would have happened if the flag had been different. Imagine that professional athletes were protesting the Mexican flag, which, if anything, is a more potent symbol of inequity and institutional racism than our own. Imagine players sitting in protest as the Mexican anthem played. Would they be lauded as heroes on CNN? Are you kidding? They'd be denounced as bigots and fired if they persisted. American elites are more comfortable attacking their own country than others for the simple reason that they love it less. That's the story here. Of course the president's tweets have been incendiary and ham-handed. They almost always are. But how remarkable that our ruling class, the most privileged group in human history, whose job it is to run this country, is willing to dismiss our national symbols as evil and illegitimate. And that's supposed to be so entirely acceptable and good and unremarkable that the mere act of criticizing it is a sign of bigotry. No country can continue with elites this corrupt and stupid, and normal people recognize that. Scott Bolden is the chair of the National Bar Association's Political Action Committee. He supports the NFL players protesting the flag, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Bolden, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So what would the reaction be from all the wise people on television if players were protesting the Mexican flag?
Okay,
or the Mexican... No, I'm serious. They would be denounced.
Okay, I got you. But your premise was the American flag or the Mexican flag, in my opinion, in my legal opinion, it's just all wrong and misguided. These players are not protesting the soldiers, the anthem, or the flag. They're protesting police brutality, social injustice, and America's reaction to it, and the fact that it persists. Now, if you don't believe
how do you know that?
Yeah, I know that because
they haven't said that.
Well, they certainly have said that.
No, they haven't.
They've said that repeatedly.
The majority of many teams. I was at the game on Sunday night, and the Raiders, almost every single player, sat for the national anthem.
Absolutely.
And sat as the colors were presented. And not one of them gave a speech there or on Twitter.
Nor would they before a game.
So all I know is I watched this or after the game. They didn't explain themselves. They protested the American flag and the singing of the national anthem.
That's not true.
Well, I watched.
They love the flag, and they love this country, and they love the U.S. Constitution as much as possible.
How do you know?
Because I've listened to them. I've listened to them.
Most of these guys
I've listened to what they said. Now, them linking arms with the owners and showing unity, Donald Trump drove that narrative because he thought that he wanted them fired. What happened is even his buddies who own teams linked arms with those black and brown ball players.
Well, that is true.
He drove that.
And the white ball players. I mean, look,
the white ball
it's not
players
necessarily.
too.
Look, I saw a ton of white players sitting out the national anthem on Sunday night.
Exactly.
It's not an inherently racial issue. I'm sorry, it's just not. I mean, there are white players, white owners doing the same thing.
If they're supporting black players, and those black players, whether it's Colin Kaepernick or someone else, they're protesting social injustice and police brutality and the fact that it's not been addressed by this president
then
and others.
How about this? Okay, why not say that? These are some of the most powerful people in our society. They have the loudest possible megaphone. They can tell us what they think.
Well, Tucker, they do say that.
Why are
You're not listening to them. They do say that.
I'm in the news business. I'm listening
clearly you're not listening to it if you don't think that's what they're protesting.
But why not just say it? Why pick our national? Because here's the truth. We fly the flag, we sing the anthem, we do all these silly civic rituals because we don't have a lot in common otherwise as Americans. We're not millennia old.
Issue.
No, it's the issue. When you start attacking national symbols, it raises the obvious question, which is why are we all united as one? What do we have in common?
Well,
I'm serious.
But see, your premise is fundamental. We're never going to agree on this issue or this interplay.
Well, but your position doesn't make any sense. Why
does.
sit for the national anthem if it has nothing to do with the national anthem, with the national symbol? Why not write a piece or give a speech and say, I'm mad about police brutality? In which case, I would, and I mean it, I would say that's a fair thing to be mad about.
You can't define how I exercise my First Amendment or these players do.
I'm not seeking to define.
Well, you are. If you tell me I can't protest while the anthem is playing, then you're telling me when, where, and how I can protest. And those soldiers fought for my right to do that.
Come on, don't even go down that. That's beneath
It's a fair path. It's not beneath you. No, it isn't.
I am not. By the way, night after night, I defend the First Amendment free expression against attempts by the left.
Except these ball players.
But I'm not attacking their right to do that. That's wrong.
Okay, so
I'm
they
not
do have a
doing
right
that.
then. So they
that goes without saying.
Right, so I don't have to
And I stated it. And
I don't have to stand for the national anthem then, right?
Of course you don't have to stand for the national anthem.
So why are you criticizing
But you
them?
should.
Oh,
you
well,
shouldn't scream. No, it's the same issue. I'm not arguing that the government should intervene. I'm arguing that decent people should behave a certain way. And if you care about this country, you should express it by the way you behave in public, especially if you're famous.
Well, let me ask you this.
That's what I'm saying.
Let me ask you this. If I were to stand and do jumping jacks during the national anthem, would you find that disrespectful? If I was to raise my fist and stand, would you find that disrespectful?
I would. Because I would.
Really?
I'll tell you why. Because it's intended that way. They're waging an attack on the idea of America that is illegitimate and fundamentally corrupt. And my point is that while that should be legal and is protected by the First Amendment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I hope you're out. I hope that you're out defending Milo and the rest.
Country, right? This is an imperfect country.
It's an imperfect
Police
country.
brutalize young black and brown men.
And
they're
white
social
men, too.
injustice. They do.
Yeah, they do.
Well, let me give you a statistic. Almost every African American in this country has a bad experience to report about the police.
But I'm not contesting
that. When they call the police, they're not protecting and serving. They're doing a lot more than that.
Look, I actually think that's a valid conversation to have, and I've said it many times in this show. And I'm one of the only conservatives I know who's willing to say, I think police brutality is something that we should discuss.
And protests
but they're
are
not
never convenient.
They're attacking the flag and the country. And I'm just telling you that when the richest people in a society decide the country they are supposed to be running is corrupt, it falls apart. That's all I'm saying. Why won't you acknowledge that?
This country is corrupt. You'd agree with that. It's an imperfect union, and it's been even more imperfect for black people and brown people.
So does that mean it's fundamentally a rotten place?
White
that's
America
the message they're
isn't
sending.
doing their part in fixing and correcting and working with people of color to make this country better.
I'm just wondering. I didn't expect to go down this road with you, but then I didn't know you were going to uncork racist sentiments like that on my show.
Race matters, and it always matters.
But I wonder if you feel, if you feel a little tinge of conscience to make a generalization based on race about an entire group of people you don't know.
What I see and what others see.
Really?
Let me tell you a real problem.
So I wonder if you would have flipped that around, you'd be bounced out of here and out of your job at your fancy law firm in about 10
not
minutes.
At all.
Yeah, because
not at all.
you're making
because I got a
First
Amendment.
Let
me tell you how I know I'm
generalization.
right. Let me tell you how I know I'm right. People of color live with racism and racial oppression every day in their communities
of color. But it is still a decent country.
Does not. So you can never understand my plight.
White America does not. So
I've been brutalized by the police. I've been offended by the police.
You're wearing $1,000 cufflinks. Don't give me the victim
Race is the tie that binds us. Economics may separate us, but the police have wrongfully stopped me. They've spread me out in front of my Georgetown home.
You, but you are diverting from the...
But they haven't to you, so you can't relate to it.
So I can't relate to it. Okay. So because I'm white, you're saying that I have no voice in this conversation.
You do.
You are fundamentally unreasonable, and the position you are taking is an inherently racist one, because you are dismissing the position of someone on the basis of his skin color, and that is outside the bounds
because of your experience or your lack thereof.
You know nothing about
my experience. Have the police ever brutalized you?
Just
wrongfully stopped you? Spread you on the ground?
Spare me, Mr. Million-Dollar Lawyer, this talk.
Well,
I'm trying to... Let me ask you a very simple question.
Okay.
I don't deny, as I've said for 5 times, that this country is flawed. It's deeply flawed on questions of race, obviously, and that police brutality is something that needs to be addressed. I believe that.
And we're not addressing it.
However, you are making a larger case that the country itself is a rotten place. And my point is, for a rich guy like you to say something like that, because you have benefited, as have I, as have lots of people like us from this country, and to dismiss the whole thing and entire portions of the population as immoral is itself like disgusting.
You're putting words in my mouth.
No,
I have not done that at all. What I'm saying is we live in 2 Americas. One black,
you live in
one
my
white.
neighborhood. I bet. Don't give me that.
We live in 2 Americas.
My first car. I'm not going to listen to this.
We live in 2 Americas. One black, one white.
Where do you live?
And until we have a race reconciliation conversation,
I'm from the city.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter. We live in 2 Americas. I bet you send your kids to private school. I bet you live in my neighborhood.
So that doesn't mean I can't be offended by the police?
Of course you can be offended.
Or I'm not racially oppressed. I can't hide my race.
Garbage we live in. What neighborhood do you live in?
That's why you can't relate to it, because you've never been discriminated against.
What neighborhood do you live in?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does. You said we live in 2 Americas. You live in my neighborhood.
I may live in your neighborhood,
Spare me.
but you've never been racially discriminated against like me.
I'm not. You know what? I've been bullied by people like you before. I'm not going to take it from a guy who lives in my neighborhood.
This is manifest white privilege right here, because you can't relate.
What neighborhood do you live in?
That somehow it's a problem. What neighborhood do you live in?
I live in Northwest D.C., west of Foxhall Road, and I bet you live there too.
That's a wealthy address.
Not as wealthy as yours.
God bless you.
God bless you. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Bolden.
Thank you.
Lou Holtz is a college football coaching legend. He won a title with Notre Dame. Jason Whitlock is a journalist with Fox Sports 1. Jason, that got a little more intense than I expected. So I don't even want to have that conversation. I just want to make the obvious point that while America is deeply flawed, the country itself is good enough that millions of people from around the world want to come here. Most Americans are actually pretty decent. Why is that such a controversial thing to say?
It's not a controversial thing to say. Listen, I think any rational person who understands American history knows we've made some really tragic mistakes in America. And I think if we look around the globe, most countries, most governments, most societies make a lot of mistakes, and people get mistreated. And so that's just a fact of life. That's a fact of the planet's history, and will probably remain. America, I happen to believe, happens to handle unfairness better than all of our competitors out there. And so it's very hard for me to ever want to give up on America, demonize America, write off America. I don't want to. I have too many friends, and most of them African American, who are members of the police force. The generalizations about the police are really upsetting to me, because I know some very good police officers. And yes, police officers have made mistakes, but I don't want to generalize about them the way I don't want white people generalizing about black people.
Well,
I don't want to be just seen.
Like that.
I don't want to be seen as, the worst of black America. And I'm sure police officers, regardless of color, don't want to be seen as the worst of whatever act some individual police officer commits. I got to be honest, Tucker. I listened to that conversation, man. That was painful, man. That was hard, because I think it represents the kind of division we have in this country. People are struggling to listen to each other and see the good in each other. I'm just really concerned about this country.
I am too. Coach Holtz, you coached for a long time. How do you think the coaches and the owners are handling this controversy this week?
Well, I think it's a real problem, and the reason is this, that it's a workplace environment. It's just like working with Walmart. You're in a workplace, you have certain obligations to try to please the customers as best you can. I think that there's an awful lot of things that happen in this country, but I want you to know, I've been unfairly ticketed. I was given a ticket when I didn't exceed the speed limit because I was coaching at one school and the patrol officer graduated from the other, and he let me know he was bitter about this. That happens in life. But the thing about it, I don't really know what they're protesting. I never see anybody on TV. I never see anybody on Twitter. I don't see anybody doing an interview and saying, this is the reason I am upset. But it does bother me when you go over to London and you kneel for the national anthem and you stand when they play God Save the Queen. To me, that is really not right. And one other thing along this line, if you aren't protesting the flag, you're picking the wrong thing to do with it. Yeah, if there's something to be done, go do it. But don't do it against this country.
Well, I kind of, Jason, I mean, you know all the players. I know a couple of them are actually smart, well-spoken, have interesting thoughts. I kind of welcome a debate on this stuff, on the details of this stuff. I'm not afraid of that. I might agree with some of it, actually. Why aren't we hearing that? Why aren't we hearing players say, here's what I think, you may not agree, but these are my views?
Because quite honestly, Tucker, I believe most of the players are out beyond their skis. And to get in a real in-depth discussion about this, again, I'm a former college football player. I identify as an athlete. I certainly identify as an African-American. I love being an African-American. I don't think these guys are experts in this cause that they're taking up. And I really think they're outside their role. They're millionaires. They're celebrities. I would love to see them acquire wealth in the National Football League, take that wealth, and invest it in the causes that they believe in. Taking on the role as spokesmen and intellectual leaders is not the proper role for 23, 28, 30-year-old football players. And I'm a former football player. I'm not denigrating them. I'm just saying people have different roles. There are people who can focus on this issue 24/7, and this is their life's passion. Getting into this racial discussion and getting into these deep political discussions, it's not a part-time job. It's not something you do in your spare time in between learning a playbook. People are outside their roles. Twitter and social media have baited them. The left-wing media has baited them into doing things that really are outside their roles and outside their area of expertise because, and this is what I believe about the left really, they want black people to take a non-strategic approach to their problems because they don't want us to really address our problems. That's why they're electing football and basketball players to be our leaders. People that can teach us to throw a football and shoot a basketball are our racial leaders. The liberal left is thrilled with this.
So I've still got Scott Bolden here who's shaking his head. He's taken off his glasses. I really quick want to give you a chance to respond to that.
If you have experienced social injustice, if you've been brutalized by the police, I don't care how much money you make, how old you are. If you want to speak out on the issue and you want to take a leadership role, then you ought to do that if you're comfortable doing that. This whole idea that at 23, 24, they can't walk and chew gum at the same time actually makes no
Tucker,
sense.
let me ask you this. Let me ask the man this question.
Okay,
Race
Jason,
is a serious, major issue in this country.
Yeah.
So is cancer. If I contract cancer, should I not go to a doctor and someone with expertise, or should I be the leader in addressing the cancer within my body? It sounds
no
good on paper what he's talking about.
There's no better expert. If I've lived with racism and racial oppression in our communities of color, I'm as much an expert as the next guy.
Okay.
All right.
Because I'm telling my story.
We're out of time. I'm being told that. I'm sorry, guys. It was great to see you. Coach Holtz, thank you. Jason. Bolden, thank you.
Thank you.
Roger Stone has been one of the president's closest allies for decades. He testified on Capitol Hill this morning about Russia. It was behind closed doors. He joins us in just a second to say what happened there. Also, we'll talk to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. He's coming up. Stay tuned. Roger Stone is a longtime Republican political consultant. He worked for President Trump for decades. He advised his campaign, a number of his campaigns, actually. Today, Stone testified for more than 3 hours before the House Intelligence Committee about his alleged ties to Russia and the ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, allegedly. In his opening statement, Stone accused Democrats on the committee of, quote, falsehoods, misstatements, and misimpressions. An exhausted but cheerful Roger Stone joins us tonight. So, Roger, no matter what you see, people are going to say, that didn't really happen. Where can I've been looking all day for a transcript of this. It took place before a committee in the Congress. How can I get an official transcript of what happened?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think you'll ever be able to get a transcript. That's my whole point, which is the Democrats on the committee had no trouble savaging me and the president in public, saying, oh, Stone knew about the hacking of John Podesta's email. I did not. Stone knew about the content of the WikiLeaks disclosures in October. I did not. Stone colluded with somebody called Goosefer 2.0, ludicrous. I did not. They say all these things in public. Stone worked for the Kremlin, one congresswoman said. Stone has worked for Russia. All these things false. They say them in public, but then they won't afford you the same opportunity, saying, oh, you have to testify behind closed doors, and we won't release the transcript. I
thought the Republicans were in charge of Congress.
Well, you would think. Look, the fair American way would be allow you to face your accuser in a public forum, to allow you to respond in the same forum in which the accusations were made. That's why I said today, President Trump is absolutely right. This is a witch hunt. This is a scandal without facts or evidence.
So you were in a colloquy with Congressman Schiff of Burbank, California.
Yes.
And you've kind of insulted each other. He's, as you just said, accused you of colluding with the Russian government. What was that exchange like today?
It was pretty intense. I mean, the most interesting thing that happened today is I made the case in my prepared statement and in the question and answer period that I do not believe there is any solid evidence that the DNC was actually hacked, never mind hacked by the Russians, and that the cornerstone of that is that the Democratic National Committee refused to let the FBI examine their servers, preferring to have a company that was paid and directed by the DNC, CrowdStrike, do so. Congresswoman Spire actually said that's not true, and then Congressman Schiff agreed with her, to which Trey Gowdy pointed out that former FBI Director Comey and Secretary Johnson of Homeland Security had both testified under oath to this very committee that that was the case, which means somebody is lying.
I think that is the case. That's what we know as of right now.
Absolutely.
Do you fear getting indicted in this?
No, not at all.
Do you think Paul Manafort will be indicted?
I can't say. I'm not aware of any wrongdoing by Paul Manafort. I most certainly have never colluded with the Russians. Look, I'm a Trump loyalist. I still think Donald Trump has the potential to be a great transformative president. And I think all of this is an effort to destabilize and delegitimize his presidency. But they're empty-handed. They have nothing.
Really quickly, why, if this were a democratically controlled Congress, do you think there would be hearings like this into a Democratic president?
Absolutely not. Look, this is an excuse. They have to come up with some excuse as to why Hillary Clinton spent $2 billion, had the support of the old media, the mainstream media, had the support of the new media in the sense that Yahoo and Google are rigging their algorithms to her benefit, and she still lost. She got outworked, outfoxed, outcampaigned by Donald Trump, and they just don't want to accept it.
I tend to think that's right. Roger Stone, thanks a lot.
Great to be here. Many thanks, Tucker.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions has a new enemy. He says authoritarians on college campuses, those who suppress free speech, must now wrangle with the Justice Department. The Attorney General joins us to discuss his plans to protect free speech next. Well, universities across the United States, hostile administrators and violent protesters have made it difficult, sometimes impossible, for dissident students, those who disagree with prevailing views, to say what they think in public. It's annoying. The question is it also illegal on public campuses? Well, today, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced a plan to intervene. Mr. Attorney General, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So what is the problem you're seeking to address with this initiative?
We have too much suppression of free and open speech on college campuses today. Particularly conservatives are being silenced in many ways. Controversial speakers are being blocked. You have the veto by the heckler who threatens to protest and disrupt the speech, so the college may withdraw the speaker's invitation so there won't be a disturbance. These kind of things really threaten the entire educational system, in my view, the integrity of it. We have a heritage of free speech. It's in our Constitution. It's deeply embedded in our whole approach to life, and we need to push back. And so we're going to push back. Some of these actions can be a violation of civil rights. You have First Amendment rights in this country to speak, and sometimes those rights can be impacted. The Department of Justice will take what steps we can to make sure that these zones, these colleges don't create limiting zones for free speech.
I can think of many occasions where the government has moved in to curtail free speech rights. Under the Woodrow Wilson administration, for example, people were sent to prison for protesting the war or whatever. Can you think of other examples of the Justice Department moving in to ensure free speech rights?
Well, I'm not able to remember that, Tucker. I just don't remember any situation in which we've gone to a point where speech is threatened. But I will say this. Back in the civil rights days, a lot of areas in the South attempted to silence voices that were against segregation. So that was a time that the federal government in many ways spoke, and I think in many ways spoke on free speech issues too. But it's an important issue. The trends have gone oddly, don't you think, from a time when we had a universal recognition that people should be able to express themselves freely and openly, to a time today where we're drifting back to trying to block people from having their voices heard.
What can these are private institutions, most of them, or many of them. What can the federal government do?
Well, we're focusing primarily on the public institutions. 33% of public institutions have some sort of speech codes that constrict freedom of speech, as I think most people would define it under the First Amendment. So this is a troubling trend. And so the First Amendment applies to public colleges and universities. And, of course, private colleges, we want to call out and talk to college presidents, deans, faculty, trustees, to say, make sure that you're not discriminating in any way against people's right to speak, and or discriminating against them academically or otherwise if they have the courage to defend their beliefs.
What sort of action are you prepared to take if they ignore you?
Well, we can intervene and possibly even file lawsuits, but we'll be intervening this week, filing a statement of interest, which the United States government is entitled to do, in a case involving a constriction of free speech that we believe is important, and we'll be filing a brief to the court explaining why we think this is an important national right.
So you're hearing a debate arise this week about free speech in the wake of the president's demands the NFL fire players who protest the American flag and other symbols of the country. Do you think that his remarks contravene the spirit of the First Amendment?
Absolutely not. The President of the United States has free speech. He believes, and I believe, that people should take a moment before a football game and stand when the national anthem is played. What's wrong with that? It's not political. It's not an affirmation of Trump or Hillary Clinton or any other agenda. It's simply an affirmation, respect for the United States of America and this great heritage of freedom, and for these football players, prosperity that they have. So I think that's a perfectly appropriate thing for the president to say. They have a right. We have no legal case to condemn a person, a football player who doesn't stand. The owners may have rights to deal with their employees on the football field. But so I think they have all the rights every American does to speak out. They've got access to the internet. They have all kinds of ways to express their own opinions. But I think every American, no matter what their views on the issues, should stand for America, should salute the flag. I think otherwise we don't have the kind of nation that's healthy that we need to have to be strong and be able to have contentious debates within it.
What do you think it's about? Why do you think that some of the most successful people in our society would be taking a public stand against symbols of the country itself?
My thought is they haven't thought it through. They haven't realized that what they're doing is actually demeaning the country, not some politician they may disagree with, not some issue that they feel strongly about, how is that the right way to express such a view? You should be able to articulate your view, advocate your view, defend your view against people who disagree. That's what America's about, not demeaning the country for which we're all blessed to live, in which we're blessed to live. So I think it's a big mistake. They haven't thought it through. Maybe they haven't been taught properly in the universities and colleges about what this means and why, historically, nations are important, that they function. Nations are how people are governed, how their lives are affected. So we need to be loyal to the great nation that we have, in my opinion, and standing up for the national anthem is certainly not too much to ask.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions, thanks.
Thank you.
The Republican Party is making MS-13 an issue in the state of Virginia's gubernatorial race. Democrats say it is racist scaremongering. A Latino activist tells us if he agrees, that's next. The Central American gang MS-13 has become a major issue in the Virginia gubernatorial election this fall. Republican Ed Gillespie released an ad accusing Democrat Ralph Northam of enabling the gang by opposing a ban on sanctuary cities. Northam's campaign retaliated by suggesting that Gillespie's ad was a racist scare tactic because, of course, what reason besides racism could you have for opposing a murderous street gang? Cristobal Alex is an activist with Latino Victory Fund, and he joins us tonight. So it's a little confusing as to, I mean, I would think everybody would be against MS-13, which, of course, preys primarily upon immigrants. Why is it bigoted to denounce MS-13?
Well, I agree with you. Everybody is against MS-13. In fact, from our opinion, if you commit a violent crime in this country, you need to be in prison. I don't care whether or not you're a Nazi attacking peaceful protesters in Charlottesville, whether you're a militia member threatening the villages around the country. It doesn't matter if you're in a gang or what it is. If you commit a violent crime, you need to be in prison.
I agree with that, yeah.
The problem with this ad, though, is it's not about that. It's a deceptive ad by Ed Gillespie, who's so out of touch with the Virginians that he discounts their intelligence. This ad isn't about MS-13. What it is about appearing to show Latinos with the same brushstroke as this gang. And that's a terrible thing. If you look at the footage from this ad, you know where it's from? It's from a prison in El Salvador. It's not even
but
from the United States.
we went to El Salvador and interviewed MS-13 members in prisons in Salvador. And there's a massive movement of gang members from that country to the United States. That's just real. But I guess my question is, isn't the hostility kind of misapplied here? I mean, who's killed more immigrants, Ed Gillespie and Donald Trump or MS-13?
Well, here's the thing. If you look at what's happening in Virginia today, and we're doing a lot of work in Virginia to make sure that Latinos turn out to vote, and when we talk to folks, Latino or not Latino in Virginia, they're upset about this ad. It looks a lot like the Willie Horton ad of the old days, or the old Prop 187
whatever.
ads.
I mean, you can throw around propaganda like that, but I want to. I mean, what is though? It looks like this. It evokes this. No, well, the ad itself. Look, I'm not flacking for Gillespie. I'm just saying that I think it's fair to denounce a murderous street gang that is, by the way, killing Salvadoran immigrants, not American-born, but immigrants. That's who they prey upon. It's fair to denounce them and to say that letting tons of people in illegally is going to increase the strength of the gang, which we know.
So I agree. We must denounce that gang or any gang in this country, Nazis or otherwise. But here's the problem. The ad is, it's basically saying that sanctuary cities are leading to these problems. And that's not at all the case. Well, last time I was on your show, and thanks for having me back, we talked about the most comprehensive study to date that says sanctuary cities are a lot safer than non-sanctuary cities. They do better with the economy.
For example, of the MS-13 members arrested in Long Island, what percentage were here illegally?
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, I do. That's why I think your point is silly, because the majority were. And you see that in Los Angeles, and you see in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. It's not to say that all people here illegally are bad. Most of them are not bad. But when you let a lot of people in illegally, you're going to get some MS-13 members. Like, that's a fact. It's not a Republican talking point. That's real.
And I agree. We're not suggesting that people should be coming here illegally to do crime. What we're saying is you've got an ad that is blatantly scaremongering, and the people in Virginia aren't going to fall for that.
Wait, but why is it scaremongering? Should you not be afraid of MS-13?
What the people in Virginia care about are what the people around the country care about. We want jobs that pay well. We want a raise. We want good health care.
They don't care about MS-13. I wonder if non-English-speaking Salvadoran immigrants who are really the primary prey of MS-13, they probably care about it because their businesses get extorted by MS-13.
What they care about are attacks, and we know this by folks with these attack ads and others. What we know is we just came out with a big poll with Latino Decisions and America's Voice. We asked Latinos what matters most to them. Immigration, surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly for some, is number one. But number two, people are worried about race relations in this country, and part of that is because of these attack ads. It's a lot like the Pete Wilson
I'm sincerely
days.
confused. So if you're Ed Gillespie, should you just not mention MS-13?
Ed Gillespie is desperate. That's why he's mentioning it.
Don't give me the campaign answer. Give me the real answer. Like, are you not?
I'm giving
am I
you the
not
real
supposed
answer.
to talk about MS-13 because it like hurts people's feelings or something? Like,
The reason why he's
what's the
talking
protocol here?
let me tell you what. The reason he's talking about it is because he's desperate.
But what
He's
should he
out of
have said?
touch.
Okay, I get it.
He should be talking
what
about
should he
what
have
the people
said?
of Virginia
No,
really
about
care
MS-13. Should he just ignore it? Is he not allowed to talk about it, or what's the answer?
So here's what's happening. Donald Trump runs for president of the United States on the very first day by attacking our enemies.
Are you? Okay.
I'm getting there, Tucker.
Look,
Wait, you act like
attacking
what I have to
MS-13
say.
is not attacking. No, because you're not giving me straight. I'm saying, what should MS-13 is a
I'm
real
telling
thing
you
in the
right now,
Commonwealth
he
of
needs to
Virginia.
be talking about the issues that matter to Virginia.
Okay, I'm not sure he should be taking campaign advice from you.
Well, Ralph Northam is doing a great job.
Right,
He's
I
talking
bet he's a great guy.
about the economy. He's talking about jobs. He's talking about
now you're flacking. I got to cut you off. But thank you,
I appreciate
Christopher
it,
Alex.
Tucker.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Jared Kushner is using a private email server, according to news reports. Can that be real after what we learned in last year's campaign? Ha! Brett Hume here to talk about it and more. Stay tuned. Well, if there's one lesson we definitely learned in the last presidential race, it's that emails can really matter. A private email server and poor security at the DNC are two of the chief reasons Hillary Clinton isn't in the White House right now. But now the Trump administration may have its own email problems. Recent news reports say that White House senior advisor Jared Kushner has conducted official White House business from a private email server he set up during the Trump transition last December. How big a deal is this? Britt Hume is our chief political analyst, of course. It seems to me, if you're paying any attention for a year and a half, the one thing you learned was you can't do business on a private email server, like, period.
Right.
How could this have happened?
Rookie.
Yeah.
Mistake. You get this young, bright guy who witnesses this all, and it doesn't hit him the same way it hits people who've been observing or participating in politics for a very long time.
Although lock her up stuff, that just didn't penetrate?
Well, I mean, I don't think he was participating in any of that silliness. But ordinary simple judgment would tell you don't do that. Now, it turns out apparently that, or at least it's being said by his lawyer, that the material has all been archived, so none of it is lost to history or lost to any investigators who might want to see it. And we have no reason to believe there's only classified material in it, as there was clearly in the case of Hillary Clinton, her denials notwithstanding. So there's probably no harm done here. But it's just bad judgment, and it makes them all look like a bunch of hypocrites for denouncing her for doing it and then doing it themselves.
Does this become something bigger?
I doubt it, but it doesn't help. Look, anytime you're in a presidency, you've got messages you're trying to communicate, right? And you may or may not have a good strategy for doing it, but you don't want it interfered with, and you don't want to go into radio silence effectively because of some blunder you made that sucks up attention.
Oh, exactly. There should be a safe at the front door of the West Wing for people's phones.
Exactly right.
There is one, actually, I think. So the Alabama Senate race today, the primary, which is in effect the race, and we're getting the results, I think, in the next hour, in Sean's hour. The president kind of went all in for Luther Strange, who's the incumbent by appointment. Not clear he's going to win. What's the backstory there?
My guess is, established to the satisfaction of the president and to the Republican leadership, that he would be an utterly loyal soldier in the Senate. And in fact, when Trump got into it with Jeff Sessions and his criticism of Jeff Sessions for recusing himself, which apparently he still gripes about privately, one of the other candidates in the race, Mo Brooks, stuck up for Sessions, an Alabaman after all, and a popular one.
Very.
Luther didn't. Luther said he was neutral and he can see both, and so on. I don't think that was his finest hour, but it was an absolutely clear example of his loyalty, that he was not going to go against Trump. So you're Trump, and you're looking at him, and you're thinking, is this guy going to be a guy that if it came down to one vote on a health care bill or something, would he up and cast it against us? I think the conclusion was absolutely not. Judge Moore, on the other hand, is a notedly independent, unpredictable, somewhat colorful character. No telling what he might do. So I think that might be the calculus. It's the only thing that makes any sense, really, when you think about it.
The phrase "no telling what he might do" is the last thing a sitting president wants to hear.
That might not make a bad campaign. So vote from Moore. No telling what he might do.
I might vote for a guy who I'm not as responsible as I should be. Brett Hume, it is great to see you.
You bet.
Thanks,
Tucker.
We'll be right back. Got some new economic numbers tonight that are kind of interesting and confirm what you may have noticed if you've driven around the country. It's a report by the Economic Innovation Group. It shows that the distribution of wealth in America is becoming more skewed. The top 20% of zip codes, many of them around here in D.C., are booming. They're getting richer every year. The bottom 20%, where more than 52 million Americans live, often in rural areas, have fallen off a cliff. They have fewer jobs than they did 17 years ago. Almost zero businesses are started there. The people who live there die on average 5 years earlier than everyone else. In entire counties, the life expectancy is actually falling. That's something that's not happened in this country since the Civil War. There have always been rich and poor here, obviously. What's new is that the gap between them is growing ever wider every year. The rich now have their own planes, the poor are on disability, and the middle class is withering away. If you want to know how this trend ends, look at Latin America. This is a crisis. But the funny thing is, no one here in Washington or New York or LA, for that matter, seems to care or even realize it, maybe because they're doing better than ever. That's a problem. That's it for us tonight. Sean is interviewing Bill O'Reilly in the next hour in just a few minutes. But first, we suspect he has an opening monologue.
It's coming. It's coming. All right. Thanks, Tucker. As always.